Yes, my name's Stephen Beerwood. I joined the military in 1980, and just to give a little bit of a background, I did a United Nations tour. I ended up on a drug called mefloquine. Mefloquine is an anti-malaria medication, which I later found out that it creates all kinds of secondary side effects, which mimic post-traumatic stress disorder. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and ended up getting out of the military system for treatment. The doctor I ended up seeing, who was specialized in PTSD, at the time Canadian military had no specialists, they were still learning. He recognized that mefloquine can cause post-traumatic stress symptoms, and it was virtually impossible to eliminate one from the other. But he said the treatment was essentially the same, so he put me on an anticonvulsant. The anticonvulsant was Tegretol. And within a couple days, literally within a course of a half hour, I just felt this great big lift and all my symptoms disappeared, so I suspect he was probably right. What I didn't know at the time was that Tegretol causes symptoms of diabetes, and prolonged use on the drug will then cause all kinds of side effects, which, I mean, if you look on paper, are the exact side effects of diabetes. And I then later found out that a doctor, I believe it was someplace in Africa, had noted that he had a patient on Tegretol who was a diabetic, and when he took him off the Tegretol, his diabetes settled down. When he put it back on, it went out of control. So anyways, after being on Tegretol for about 10 years, I started getting a lot of muscle cramps. I started thinking that this could be related to a lower back injury I had sustained, but I was also thinking it could be a side effect of the Tegretol. And I hadn't put the diabetes and the Tegretol together at this point, but I did get off of the Tegretol as a precaution to see if the symptoms would stop. They didn't, they increased, and so I started investigating for further back trauma, thinking, okay, maybe it's sciatica or something like that. I ended up speaking with an orthopedic surgeon. They did CAT scan and a whole bunch of other stuff and said, nope, this isn't sciatica. Maybe you should look at restless leg syndrome or get some blood work done. So I had a bunch of blood work done and came back, and turned out my blood sugar that particular morning was over 22. And my A1C, which is your 3-month reading, was somewhere around 17, if I remember that one correctly. And in the aftermath of that, I just kind of looked at it all and I thought, you know what, I don't need to be alive in this body as it rots in around me, so I opted to go straight onto insulin, and that was 3 years ago. When I got on the insulin, I really didn't want to be on insulin. It was kind of one of those things where I'm damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So what I did was I started researching ways that maybe I can get off of it, reduce it, or deal with it. I just did not want to be on insulin for the rest of my life. So in my studies, I started learning about things. One of the things that kept popping up on the internet was chromium. So I tried chromium for a month, and although my blood sugar levels were really steady, they didn't go down to the point where I could withdraw off of insulin or anything like that. But I didn't stop looking either. I continued to look, and I started learning a lot about things. One of the things I started learning about in more detail than I already realized was sugar and hormones and stuff. Insulin is a hormone first and foremost, and hormones react with each other, so they balance in your body. So if you increase one hormone, the rest have to increase. If you decrease it, the rest have to decrease. Sugar, one of the things I found out more detail about sugar, I already knew that sugar broke down into glucose and fructose. And even natural sugars which occur in the body, like sucralose, for example, still break down into equal portions of glucose and fructose. But I started finding out that artificial sweeteners, or anything which has been processed, even if it's not artificial, but it's been highly processed, it starts breaking down almost entirely into fructose, 97% or greater. Some of these sugars, for example, have 0 calories, yet they convert 100% to fat, and they begin their process of conversion right in the bloodstream. So I started looking at the alternative sugars and stuff as not being an option to decrease my glucose. The other thing I started beginning to realize is that if you have too much fructose in your system, the symptoms are identical to too much glucose. So essentially what you have is a non-treatable form of diabetes, which is caused by too much fructose. And that's one of the causes of major obesity, which we have going on, of course, in society today. It's just the sheer amount of fructose that we have in our diet. Back to the hormones. I'll tell you a bit more of the hormones after I started getting off the insulin, because that's ultimately what this is about. I kept looking for a solution, a cure. I even sat down with a group of men and we prayed outright. I wanted healing. I wanted off of this drug. And each time we had done that, you know, I kept getting back to this chromium idea. And about December of last year, which was 2012, we started looking at Dr. Wallach's Youngevity, which is essentially 90 essential minerals, and then there's a few other supplements on top of that. And for diabetics, he was recommending chromium and vanadium. So I looked at this a lot more seriously than I had looked at it. At the time, I had had surgery on my hand. I had been playing with a power saw, which I'm not allowed to play with anymore. And I had cut my fingers, and I had surgical repair. It's been a long recovery, 8 months. So I ended up going on prednisone, trying to get some of the inflammation down, and my blood sugar spiked. I mean, it just went crazy. Even with 8 units of insulin and 2,000 milligrams of metformin, my blood sugar was still up at, you know, around the 17 level, and it just seemed like it was going to continue to go up. Now, prednisone does that for blood sugars, and it's really not a great idea for diabetics to be on prednisone for any length of time. So that prompted me to look really even harder at Dr. Wallach's formula, and you know, I started looking at it. I looked at the cost, and I've been in the medical system for 17 years. I have, well, my last base surgeon told me I had an equivalent to a 4th-year medical student's knowledge in medicine. My surgical skill from what I did in the military is probably equal or greater than most practitioners, and I have a fair amount more experience as well. That aside, an interview he had done with Ben Fuchs, who was a pharmacist, really spoke to me. And the key part was when he broke down the minerals and how we uptake them with colloidal suspension, and how we need all the minerals for the body to rebuild. If you're missing key minerals, your body can't rebuild. It doesn't have the tools it needs. And I really wanted off the insulin, so I looked at the price cost and the time commitment, and he said basically 3 months. I looked at it, it's going to cost me around $600. As skeptical as I was at the time, I thought, hey, this is an investment. I'm willing to lose $600 to find out, especially if it gets me off of insulin. So I started taking it in December on the 23rd, just before Christmas, and about mid-January or so, my blood sugar was right down into the 4s, mid-4s in the early mornings, and so I dropped my metformin by 1,000 milligrams. And the reason I did that was I knew that metformin inhibits the absorption of foods, so I figured I'm also inhibiting the absorption of a lot of key nutrients. And so I wanted to get off the metformin first before insulin, so that my body would at least get the nutrients it needed to complete its healing. Late January, early February, I got off the remaining dosage of my metformin, and for the record, I did not consult my doctor, and maybe I should have, but he kept telling me, no, I have to be on the metformin, I have to be on the insulin. And I really didn't want to be on it. This seemed to be working, so I decided to reduce my insulin without consulting my doctor. The initial response I wasn't quite ready for, because I didn't fully understand. I understood how hormones and how they work and how they balance, but I didn't expect the result I got. I really felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, and I probably can relate better now to a woman going through menopause. The hormonal imbalance which happened, and the spikes and ebbs and flows that created, not just in my blood work, but emotionally and stuff, I wasn't quite prepared for, so I ended up putting myself back up to the 6 units of insulin that I was taking. And I allowed my blood work to stabilize over a couple weeks, and once it was stable, and I had done a lot more reading on the hormone balance and stuff, I felt I was ready again, so I dropped it back down to 5 units in insulin. And at this point in time, I still had no metformin, and I was ready for it this time. And so although I felt kind of really out of sorts for a week or so, I was able to watch my blood levels continue to drop. And after about 2 weeks, beginning of March, I dropped another unit of insulin down to 4 units. 10 days later, as my blood level units were starting to decrease again. I had gone on a trip down to see some family. I was at my brother's house and I'd had a snack. I was getting ready to do my insulin, but we got talking and then I forgot to do my insulin. That morning, my blood sugar was at 6.7 the next morning, and that was on March the 10th, 11th of 2013. And I kind of went, wow, I think I just did the hard withdrawal without realizing it. So I didn't take any insulin, and I waited, and my blood sugar levels remained low for the rest of the day, well down into the low 6s, right through past supper. So I didn't take any insulin that night either, and I thought, okay, we'll wait and see what happens. And the next morning, my blood sugar was up to 8 point something, so I kind of looked at that and I thought, well, you know what, when I dropped the units of insulin, my hormones tried to adjust, everything changed, so I'm not going to do any insulin, I'm not going to panic. By noon it was down to 7.1, by supper it was back down to 6.1. So again, I didn't take any insulin for the second day. The next day, blood sugar levels were considerably lower. I think they were back into the 6s. And this continued to go on. I've had, over the past 2 weeks now, 1 or 2 8 point somethings, low 8s. A lot of mid 7s and high to mid 6s. I've had as low as 5.9 for a morning sugar, and none of it is with any insulin and none of it is with any metformin. And at this point I can feel my whole body just sort of changing and relaxing. General stiffness and all kinds of other secondary stuff is just sort of like disappearing, and my blood sugar levels, like I say, they're continuing to drop. So all I did was take this healthy blood pack, which is this mixture of minerals, like a broad spectrum, like the 60 trace minerals with 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids. There's another product called OsteoFX, which is sort of bone and joint, which is a lot more magnesiums and calciums and stuff like that. And another one, ETF or EFA. It's fish oils, more fatty acids, and then the what they call the sweeties, which is the chromium and vanadium. And I took it as directed, according to body weight. Dr. Wallach told me 90 days we'd be off of the insulin. 78 days, folks, and I am insulin free. Been insulin free for a couple weeks. I'm going to continue to monitor, and I'll post a secondary video with a follow-up. I have a friend who's just started. He's been threatened with insulin in 3 months' time. When he checks into his doctor, his blood sugars are up at 11. He ordered his products already, and he'll be beginning his supplements next week. So he's agreed to keep track of everything, and hopefully I'll be able to add his progress in as well. So for all you diabetics out there, you don't need to take insulin. And even that, small note, the insulin today, that stuff is all genetically modified. They've taken plants, spliced it with human genomes. There are questions as to whether or not there are cancer links to it. Most of that is downplayed. The argument quite often is the benefits of being on insulin as opposed to the benefits of not being on it and having high blood sugar or having a risk of cancer is essentially outweighed by the benefits of being on insulin. The reality is, though, they're not telling the whole truth, and the whole truth is you don't need to be on insulin. You can take just a natural mineral supplement and you can have a healthy living without doing insulin, without those added risks. So stick with it, and with any luck, some of you will join me. Thanks.